space of 50 and a solid 3 viewers every stream for a month straight. Not that much time.
Okay, so we're going to make the object class, right click on the project and go to add class. And we'll call it object. Let's put some basic object stuff in here. Now I'm probably going to want to use vectors. So in globals, I'm going to make my vector class. I'm just going to put it here because this is already going everywhere and there's no reason not to. So just leave it as that for right now. And then we can include globals up here at the top. I'm going to give everything a name. This is mostly for debugging purposes. If you're having trouble with debugging, sometimes it helps if your objects in your program have a name. Do we have string in global? We don't have string. I'll put it up here then. I'm going to have a position vector and a velocity vector. Those are just basic physics vectors there. We're going to have angles. Although I think the only one that needs an angle is the snake. So we'll just reserve that for the snake. We're going to need, do y'all want to just draw blocks or do you want to use textures? Do you want your snake to have eyes or do you want him to look like a Minecraft snake?
Just have it have eyes.
Okay. We have a little more freedom this way. Everything has a name, a position, a velocity, a texture, and a rectangle. We may want to come back and add other things later, but that's what's coming to me right now on a Monday morning. We got our constructor, destructor. Go ahead and make the destructor virtual. And then we'll have an update function, and draw function. can use the light bulb to get those started. And let's go over to our object source file and initialize our values. So position equals velocity equals, I'm just going to say v2d 0, 0. I don't have a constructor for 2 arguments, so I'm going to make that. You hold down Control and click on v2d, it will take you to the structure. And there we can put in a constructor, just the base constructor. Say x equals y equals 0. And then we'll have a 2 argument constructor, v2d, float x, float y. And set those based on the parameters passed in. So if my defaults are going to be 0 anyways, I don't need to use this one right this second. Back to object. I don't know that we need to do this at all now, but I don't think there's any harm there. The texture. We'll set that equal to null. If we want, we can come up here and modify this later, and we can have the name of the texture passed in, but I think this is just fine. And default value for rectangle, we'll just make it all zeros. Name is just there. We can set name to default. And that's just some base values for an object. All right, for draw, We'll just do a render copy, SDL render copy. We'll need a renderer, so we will have to pass that in. We have a texture, and we have a rectangle. So back in the header file, make sure your draw function accepts a renderer. And then in the CPP, and that way we can get the renderer over here if we want to use this function. We can also overload this function if we decide we don't want to use render copy. If we want to use render copy EX, or if we just want to draw a rectangle, we'll be able to do that. Might be useful to draw rectangles starting off, but we have the ability to put in custom graphics if we want to. Update, not a whole lot going on right here, and that's fine for right now. We may want to update later. Okay, let's add a square. So we'll add a new class. Square, good name for it? Grid square? No one has anything better. You can do it. You can call it whatever you want. You want to balance your names between being obnoxiously long and hard to write and being so short that nobody knows what they are. Alright, so here's square derived from object. What are some extra things that square needs? It's going to need we've already got position vector, we have a rectangle for the width. I think we can just use those. It might have a color. Definitely needs a color. And let's use the texture here. I wasn't going to use the texture here, I just want to draw a block. At least starting off, we're just going to draw a block. So, with that being said, do void draw. We'll have this one draw a block, and we need to set up the constructor. I say we add a constructor that we can use to set the position. We may want to set some other things with it, so but at least set the position. Come up here and include, no, we don't need to do that. Object should bring in everything. So let's make a definition for this one, and let's make a definition for this one. hop over here and fill these out. Are you running that off of your flash drive?
Yeah.
You should not do that.
Yeah.
When we take a break, I want you to copy your project to the desktop. And then when you're done, you can put it back on your flash drive. But yeah, doing anything off of a flash drive is going to be slow. Okay, name equals square. Position equals position, so we'll have to say this position equals position. Oh, we said we wanted to add a bool to make sure, or to determine whether or not a square is a wall or a square is a square you can pass through. I'll add that over here. Bool is wall. Default false. And for a draw function for the wall, or for a square, we use SDL render fill rect renderer and the rectangle. And to set the color, we can use SDL underscore set render draw color. Here you can use your red, green, blue. I'm going to just start with like some sort of gray. So if they're all the same, it's going to be some shade of gray. With all zeros being black and 255s would be all white. So that should be like a dark gray, just to start us off. And you could say, you know, if is wall, make it one color. Let's make our walls red. And then else, just copy that and then go back to your normal space color. Right. Gray floors, red walls. Now with the grid, all of the squares are linked to each other. We want our snake to be able to move from one square to the next. So we may want to turn this into like a linked list where every square is linked to the 4 adjacent squares. Not diagonal because nothing moves diagonal in Snake, but we may want to link them all up and down and left and right. So that the snake knows where it can go from wherever it is. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's necessary, but it seems like it would be easier that way. So I'm going to set it up for that, and if I decide it's a bad idea, we'll clear it out. Let's go back to the header file. To make this a linked list, can anybody guess what we need here? I'm going to set all of these equal to null pointer. And then after we create all the squares, we can run a for loop that ties them all together. Oh, we need to set our height and width. So, how big is a square? And we can experiment with this. You can make it variable. If you want to get fancy, you kind of base it on resolution and window size and things like that. But we can start off with the 10 by 10 and then go from there and decide if it should be bigger or smaller. We'll set our X and Y based on our position. Now we can try these guys out. Let's go to game state. Well, someone didn't do their homework. So we're missing level 1. So if you did your homework, you probably already have this.
That was a different lab.
What did we do in the last one?
We just made the menu the last one.
Yeah, we make the menus. This one where you're talking about the level is the one that I brought up earlier where we made controls for the diagonal pictures.
So you didn't have one for game?
We just made the menu last time. So I made the pictures for the menu. I made like the menu go back and forth with the different states.
Yeah, but how many different states? Was there a level state?
Here's a start state, yeah.
Start?
It didn't do anything.
Start options.
Okay, well this would be the equivalent of your start state. So if you have a start state, you can use that. I'm calling it level 1. Normally you start at level 1. Sometimes I guess you could start in a tutorial. Class mistake?
I said, is this a class and state?
Yes. Man, Visual Studio is slow. Okay. I don't think I need a button here, so. Level 1 can be like that. Like I said, if you have start state, then this is basically what I'm doing here. And I'm going to copy I don't need the constructor. I need the enter. And I need the update. I'm just going to copy that from options and exit. Well, I can't do that. I have to copy the guts. So just the guts of update should work. Paste that in my level 1 update. The update function from options, and I just pasted in my level 1 update because most of this is going to be the same. We're going to set up a main loop, we set up an event handler, we get our input. Now the input's going to be different, but the setup is going to be the same. We're going to clear the screen and draw and all that good stuff. Why is it upset about, oh, because I got rid of the button, so I've scrapped that. I'm going to scrap this case for the mouse button. No longer need to update that. What did base update do? It just updates the mouse, so we can scrap that as well. We're not going to have a mouse while we're playing. I do want my main loop. I do want my poll event and my ability to shut down. I do want to get keyboard input, so this is good. Huh?
The menu button, draw, random.
Yeah, we'll take that out.
What about our scan code for the new?
This wouldn't hurt anything, but it's not. I would leave that in there actually. Let's just leave that there. Should we take a break? Alright, here we go. When I clear screen here, I'm not giving it a color. And since we do set a color when we draw a square, it's going to be important to set a color back when we clear the screen. So we're going to do that here. SDL underscore set render draw color.
Is this in the start update?
Yeah.
Yeah, the level, whatever your level file is. I called it level 1. You may have called it start, but it's in the update function. Well, we've got a background texture here, so this is not overly important. If you have a background, does everyone have a background for this level?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was our homework.
Okay, then what I'm doing isn't going to make any sense then. Because if you draw your background, then that's going to be fine. I don't have a background. I guess I can make one. Alright, scrap that. Never mind. I'll make one.
So we don't need
So wherever I create this, I have to set that background texture. I'm just playing catch up. Okay, that should work. Something we do need to do in this constructor is create our grid. So in your level 1 or your start constructor, after you load in your background texture, we need to bring in a square. Do we include squares? Up at the top, I'll include square.h. In my constructor here, we will create a grid of squares. How many squares?
10.
10?
Yeah.
It would be a tiny game.
Then 1,000.
The monitor's only so big, Fonzo.
Go big or go home.
Alright, I'll hold you to it. Alright, double for loop because we are going to run a grid. You know what, I did this wrong. This needs to go in the header file. We'll move that include over here. And then in our level 1 or your start class, let's add a grid of squares. Square pointers to be exact. If they're 10 wide or 10 tall and go 100 by 100, this is going to be off the screen. Let's go 50.
How are we gonna know where they are?
How are we going to know where they are?
Because we won't be able to see them.
Why wouldn't you be able to see them?
This grid, will we be able to see them?
We'll be able to see them. Now, starting off, we'll be able to see them. Eventually, we will just make them, it will look like a flat wall. And really, we could make this dynamic. We could just say, int grid size equals 50, and then you could put a grid size in here. Now, Visual Studio is not going to let us do that unless we make this a constant. Because your array cannot be variable. But this will make it so you can easily come back and change the size of what is wrong. Non-static member reference must be relative to a specific object. I'm not sure why it's upset. Visual Studio is really bad with arrays.
Oh, yeah.
I just made it static and it worked.
But there's no reason to make it static. I shouldn't have to make it static. So there's our 2D array of square pointers. Now we can go back to our level 1 constructor, and instead of doing this 100 by 100, we go 50 by 50. And we'll create our new squares in here. So grid ij equals, what do I put here? What is it, Brent? What?
I don't know.
At least you're honest. New square. And we want to set the position of the square. How would we do that?
Draw it.
You get it rendered, don't you?
No. We got to give it a position. We have a constructor that accepts a position here. If you want to set up a grid, you can think of your I's as your rows and your J's as your columns. So if I go I times 10, what would that do? And J times 10. The first time through, I is 0. 0 times anything is 0, so my first one is going to be a 0, 0. And then J goes up to a 1. So I will still be 0, and then J will be 1 times 10, that is 10. And then 2 times 10 is 20. You see what we're doing? We're making a square 10 spots, 10 pixels over every time the loop runs. And then when J finishes out and I goes up to 1, we'll make the second row and it will go across.
So, will it work?
Let's make it an 11. Just so there's a line of pixels in between them. And this is the X, so yeah, we go across. Actually, I think we're going down, and then down, and then down. That's okay. Any questions on this? You understand what we're trying to do? Does it work? Nobody knows. All right, and in our draw down here, we'll need to run a for loop. After we draw the background, we don't need to draw the mouse. Get rid of the mouse. After we draw the background, we need to draw all of our squares. So that should draw it.
We have to ask something.
Oh, good call. All right, that should draw it. We need to start off in that state though. So where did we set current game state? Is that up at the top here? Yeah, current game state, we set it to menu. We need to instantiate level 1. If you haven't done this already, you may already have this.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you only instantiate so many of them? Because whenever I tried to make exit inside here, it wouldn't let me. It's all of a sudden it's made everything virtual. So, and they just threw a bunch of
Exit is not a game state. Exit is leaving the game, like quitting the
Well, I
program.
tried to make an exit button, and so I had to like make it one of these, and it wouldn't let me. Like the exit button, it wouldn't let me make it because every time I made it in the header column, like up here with the rest of them, it just started throwing a bunch of.
It may conflict with the STD exit, but I don't think so. It should just override that. I would have to see it. I need a level 1 pointer, so I'll add that. Again, you probably already have this. There's my level 1. Here's my new level 1. And instead of starting in menu, I'm going to start in level 1. Let's just see if this even runs. Bound to be some errors after coding for an hour. I'm not trying anything.
It's so weird.
Did yours work?
It just doesn't fill the screen.
Mine doesn't work. Mine's broke.
Mine works, it looks weird.
Oh, I don't think I set my bool for running. That may be,
Oh, yeah.
that may be a problem. Okay, so there's our grid. Did everybody get a grid? That is magnificent. Beautiful. That will give us something to start with, and now we can see, you know, if we wanted to make it a little bit wider, we could go in the X direction. We could go above 50. We could go up to 100 if we wanted to, or we can tweak it around from there. And when we want to get rid of these lines, we just take it back to 10 instead of 11, and then they'll all be right beside each other. So that's, if you wanted it to look like flat terrain, I think if I just change those two, yeah, there we go, but it's still a grid. I'm going to leave it in grid form just for debugging purposes.
So, what if we wanted to like move the grid over to the middle, where you have like a barrier on the outside? Can we do that?
If you want to move the grid over to the middle.
Or do you see what I'm saying? Like, we move the grid here, and then we have like just texture on the outside, just to like
Yeah.
Okay, you can do an offset. So for every single square, we just want to scoot them over to the right 200 pixels. And maybe we want to scoot them down 100 pixels. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Everything that happens in this loop is for each square. So if I want to scoot over 200, I'll just add 200.
Whoa.
In theory. In theory, I might be wrong.
No, it moved.
There we go. So you can move it that easy. All right, let's see if we can get some walls. I want walls around the outside. I think I can use this same for loop. Since we're already iterating through every single square, I'm going to say if I equals 0 or I equals we don't go all the way to 50. 49. And same thing for J. J equals 0 or J equals 49. It's important that you put 2 equals here. If you only got 1, you're going to have a whole bunch of walls. So anyways, this basically says if we're on the outside, is wall, grid I, J is wall equals true. And then that should set everything on the outside to red. And the computer recognizes that those grid squares are walls.
Oh.
Bad math?
Mine's not a sensitive eye.
Are you in the loop?
Mine has just like a single red line. Like
You got to be in this loop. So make sure you've got okay, that code has to be in this double for loop.
When I say an eye is not a modifiable value.
Make sure you're in the double for loop. And you have grid, I in brackets, J in brackets.
Well, in the if statement it's saying that.
What?
Oh, I know what I did wrong.
But at least that gives us some groundwork. What else?
Make the snake.
Alright, we can move over and work on the snake. Add class. Snake. Base class. Object. Virtual destructor. What is a snake? It's gonna need an update function. You gotta think about this. You gotta like, what do I need to create a snake? How is the snake different from just a plain Jane object? A snake has an angle. Right? Because if it was just a square, we could get rid of the angle. But if we want him to have eyes and actually face the direction he's going, then he will need an angle. Or we could use flips. Remember, you can flip a texture, left, right, up and down. So you could use flips instead of angles, since he never goes on any angle that isn't some factor of 90 degrees. I don't know, we'll go with angle for right now. Maybe change it later. We're gonna need a update. That'll be a virtual update. And if we use our angle, we'll need our own draw function. We'll be using render copy EX, so we'll put that in there. So for our snake class, to update the snake, we're going to need to get input, or we may be able to do that from the game state and just update the snake based on that. But somehow we're going to have to tie our input to the snake's behavior. Okay, snake is going to have a speed. Just realize that. We have velocity, but speed will determine the magnitude of that velocity. Our snake might have it might be important to have a grid or a square, like the snake is on this square. I don't know, I'm going to put it as a comment because I'm not sure I want to do that, but most of the time the player needs a live bool. Otherwise, he keeps moving around when he's dead. And like you quit taking input or you disregard input if the snake is dead. Things you take for granted. When I first made a spaceship game, I made the spaceship where it could get blown up by the enemy, but I forgot to put in a bool to disregard input, so you could move around all of the particles of the spaceship as it was exploding. Kind of cool. The explosion was based on the position of the spaceship, so they all kind of just moved around in unison. Default will be true. What I'm thinking right now is the head of the snake is going to be a little bit different than the tail, so we may be working on the head right now, and then work on the body in a different class. This is just things you got to think through this stuff. How is this going to behave? What is this object going to do, and how does it work? That's how you determine what code goes in the classes and in the update and so on. I'm going to go ahead with the current square, and if we decide it's a bad idea later, that's fine. So up here at the top, found include square. When we start the level, we'll create the snake and we'll set this pointer based on wherever the snake should start for that level. Let's go to our snake constructor. The texture for the snake, if our squares are 10 by 10, do we want to stick with that? Does that seem good? So here, the image we use for the snake will be a 10 by 10 then, because the snake's head should occupy one square. I'm going to need the renderer. I have to pass that in. We'll set the rectangle based on we said 10 by 10.
Should we make the squares a little bit bigger though? It's gonna look really, really, really small. It's like one, it's gonna be really small. One square.
You think it's too small?
Yeah.
I mean, we can change it. We just don't want to get off of the screen. Other thing is, like, 10's easy to work with,
Yeah.
so
Let's just do it this way. We can make it bigger later.
yeah, we can make it bigger later. It's just going to be kind of a pain to have to go back and find everything that has to be changed. Okay, so we set speed, we set the texture, we set the rectangle. I'm going to set the name. Like I said, this is mostly for debugging, and you may never use it, but it's nice to have it there if you do run into some bugs and you've got a whole bunch of objects that you're trying to track down. That seems pretty good. We'll need to set its position and velocity, but I think that's done in object to 0. I think we'll set velocity to speed and 0. That says he's moving to the right at a speed of 1. At least that's what it is for now. Which is the way I remember Snake starting. He just kind of goes to the right. Draw, we can do that, that'll be easy. SDL, render copy, EX, render texture, null, address of the rectangle, the angle, null, and SDL, flip, all caps, flip, none. All right, in update we will do get input or read input. And then we will move the snake, check collision, and in the check collision we will determine whether or not the snake dies, whether he got an egg. I think that's it. Maybe update score. So on. I feel like that's enough for now.